we've already focused on animal introduction, which included the body plans and anatomical positions. Now that's going to be on your upcoming quizzes and tests, so make sure you don't just set that aside, but keep reviewing that content. Then we opened the door to the specific phylums of invertebrates. We focused on Porifera, which were including sponges, and then phylum Cnidaria. And the Cnidarians included jellyfish, hydra, sea anemones, and coral polyps. Now we're going to move to our third little section, which is going to be worms. Now, worms is not a phylum. Actually, this worm category is going to be divided into 3 phylums. So how many phylums, if we're including these 3 phylums of worms, how many phylums have we covered so far? Porifera is 1, Cnidarian is 2, and then we're going to have these 3 worm phylums. So far you're going to focus on 5 phylums on your quiz this Thursday. And remember, phylums are a more specific section or category under the broader kingdom of Animalia. So all of these, sponges, Cnidarians, worms, these are all animals. The 3 worm phylums are divided as following. Number 1, flatworms. This is phylum Platyhelminth. Now, Platyhelminth, the focus here is flat, plat. That's a great hint for you. You're going to have to match these up with examples, the phylum name with an example, and you're going to have to know that these are flatworms. So P-L-A-T and F-L-A-T, flat and plat. These are flatworms. These flatworms will include tapeworms and planaria and flukes. Then we have roundworms, which is nematoda. Now the focus, when you say the word nematoda, think of O, that focus is on the O. That O looks round. This is a hint for nematoda are roundworms. You also have 2 O's in roundworm. Then we have segmented worms. Segments are defined. Remember, a segment is a division, a separation. So phylum Annelida, these are earthworms, sandworms, and leeches. And these worms have little segments or separation, little tissues within their body that separates. And so let's talk about Platyhelminths. These are the flatworms, and yes, they do have bilateral symmetry. So if we look at it, there is a left and right side to it. Many of them will have some sort of head region that identifies and helps us identify that there is going to be a bilateral symmetry. Now, these worms do not have a colon, which means body cavity. There is still a mouth, there is still feeding apparatuses, but there's no body cavity there, like the Cnidarians had. They are going to thrash around using muscles in their body for movement. Many of these worms that we're going to be focusing on today, even the earthworms later on when we talk about phylum Annelida, are hermaphrodites. So make sure you know the word hermaphrodite. They have both male and female sex organs. Remember, these worms are parasitic. They're in a harsh environment, and their goal is to get nutrients from the host. Just in reality, they don't have an opportunity to make babies. So, especially with tapeworms, they have both male and female sex organs in their body, and we'll talk about that in a second. But some examples are the planaria. You can see at the bottom the little brown things. They're very tiny. Then we have the tapeworms and the flukes, and we're going to talk about those now. Now, this is the planaria. If you take a look at the planaria, there are a couple key parts that you're going to have to know. The first and most important one that defines the planaria is the eye spot. Eye spots help detect light. When we learned about the euglena, which was in kingdom Protista, the euglena used the eye spot to find light so it could use the light to perform photosynthesis. But the problem here with the planaria is that the eye spots help it detect light so it can get away from the light. Now, I'm going to tell you a quick story. When I was in Korea, I ordered a container of Planaria, and they came in 2 containers. And when they came in those 2 containers, they were sealed with a foam around them to keep it dark. Well, I used one of the containers, and in my class, we would actually do experiments on these Planaria, and I'll explain that in just a second. But Miss Allison, she was working across the hall from me. She was teaching middle school while I was teaching high school. And she said, "This is so awesome. Can I borrow them?" And I said, "Sure." Well, I handed them to her, and she was busy, and she set them on her desk. Well, right next to the desk is a beautiful open window. So as the next morning approached, the sun came up and basically beamed right through the window, right on the desk. Well, guess what? When she came to work on the Planaria and to set them up for her class, she looked at them and they were all fried. The clear water with the little tiny Planaria was no longer clear. It was muddy water. These Planaria break down and die because of sunlight. Now, another part of the Planaria is the ganglia. Now, the ganglia is another name for the brain. This is a mass of nerve cells. Now, it's not as complicated as our brain, but it is a mass of nerve cells. Remember, these worms can react because of the nerves throughout their body, and the eye spots are connected to this ganglia. There's a nerve ladder throughout the body. There's also a mouth and pharynx, and the mouth is somewhat near the end of the Planaria. But what I love about the Planaria was why I ordered the Planaria for the experiments in the first place, was that they regenerate. So if you cut a Planaria in half, it will regrow. So take a look at the picture. If I go ahead and cut the head off and the tail off of the Planaria, the head will grow a new Planaria, the tail will grow a new Planaria, and then the body will regrow a head and a tail. But what was also pretty cool is that we actually cut the Planaria down the head so that there was a left side and a right side that was separate. Guess what happened? The left side regrew a right side, and the right side regrew a left side. So the Planaria now had 2 heads. And remember, if it has a head region, that's called a cephalo region or cephalization. So this Planaria has a cephalization, a cephalized area, a head region, and it also has a caudal or tail region. Now we're going to go to our tapeworms. Tapeworms are our parasitic worms. Now, in one of the previous pictures of tapeworms, there was a picture of its head region. There was these little holes, like little suction cups, and these little hooks. Now, these suction cups and hooks on the head is called the scolex. That's a term you're going to need to know. So tapeworms have something called a scolex, a head that will hook and suck into the host. It will suck nutrients, but it will dig its little hooks into the host, so it will firmly grab hold. Tapeworms also, because they're in the host's intestines, they have a protective covering called a cuticle. This protective covering allows it to survive the harsh environments of an acidic intestinal environment. Now, this cuticle is also called a tegument. So I will take either term, cuticle or tegument. Now, you have heard the word cuticle before when we were talking about plants. We talked about mosses have this waxy layer which protects it from losing water. Now, this is different, but it's still a protective covering so that it can be in the harsh acidic environments of the intestine of the host and not get broken down and die. Now, we said one important part was the scolex, the head, but it also has these little sections. Now, all these sections include a male and female part. So that means each section can make hundreds of eggs, and a tapeworm has hundreds of sections. And these sections are called proglottids. And we'll take a look at that on the next page. And we're going to take a look at that on the next page. And because of those proglottids, the tapeworm is a hermaphrodite, having both male and female sex organs. Okay, here's a look at the tapeworm. You can see on the right-hand side is the scolex, the head region. You can see the suckers and hooks. And then you can actually see on the left-hand side are all the proglottids. And inside each one of the proglottids, each one of the sections are going to be the testes, which is going to release the male sperm. And then you have the uterus and ovary, which is the female. Now you can see the testes fertilizes the ovary, and then they can go ahead and release the eggs from each proglottid. Now, this is amazing because while it's feeding on the host, it's also releasing these little eggs and also proglottids. So as the animal poops, the feces, which is the poop, the stool, is going to contain a lot of these eggs and sections of these proglottids. Now these eggs are going to start hatching, and these larvae are going to feed off of the nutrients of the poop. Now that's why it's so important when you go outside, you want to wear shoes. If you step on dog poop, there is a chance, if you step on any animal poop, there's a chance that there could be a parasitic larva inside. That's how a lot of these are passed on. That's how dogs many times will have tapeworms, because they step on another dog's poop, and that larva goes into the pad of the foot and then works its way from the blood into the intestine. These larval worms will then grow within the intestines. Now another type of parasitic worm is the fluke. The fluke can survive in the blood and the liver. We're not going to focus on the fluke very much, but there was a picture on the page of Platyhelminths. Now let's move into Nematoda. Nematoda are roundworms. Remember, I gave you the hint, O, Nematoda for roundworms. These also have bilateral symmetry. And the reason for that, even though they look round or cylinder shaped, they could be maybe a type of radial. They're not, because of the excretory openings. So they do have an anus, they do have a mouth, they do have different openings on a certain part of its body to identify a bottom area. So they're showing a left and right side. Now, because they do have a mouth and anus, they have complete digestion. Remember, when we talked about cnidarians, like the jellyfish and the sea anemone, they only had one opening, so that was incomplete. But here we have complete digestion. These worms also have a cuticle or tegument, which is a protective covering, just like the tapeworm, to survive the acidic environments of the host intestines. And some examples are the Ascaris and hookworm. Here you can see some pictures of the hookworm. Now we're going to focus on the last phylum, which is Annelida. Annelida includes, most famously, the earthworm, but it also includes the sandworm and the leech. They're also going to move by muscular layers in the body. These muscular layers are not only longitudinal, going from one end to the other, but also circular. Now the earthworm has setae, which are bristle-like anchors. Now you can't see them. They're not like little tiny feet, not like a centipede, but if you run your finger down an earthworm, you can actually, this is something you would do in class, in which you would feel the bristles. And so the earthworm would stretch out, dig its bristles in the ground, and bring its butt close, dig its butt bristles in the ground, stretch its front, dig its front bristles in the ground, bring its butt close. So that's how the earthworms are going to move. They're going to stretch by using their muscles, and then dig their bristles into the surrounding dirt and environment. Now these bristles, remember, cannot move around. They're not like little feet. They're more like little anchors. Now earthworms specifically have little internal segments and external segments. If you feel an earthworm, you'll feel bumps on it, different segments. And these segments are called septums or septa. Now our heart has, now one famous example in our own body is our heart. Our heart has a septum, a septa, a separation between the left and right atria and ventricles. So a separation is called a septum. Now, earthworms will also respire. They'll breathe through their skin. And earthworms also have a nervous system. And we've already talked about what the ganglia is. It's kind of like a simple brain. It's a mass of nerve cells. But what's interesting about the earthworm is that it has a ventral nerve cord. It has a spinal cord. Even though it does not have a backbone, it does not have an exoskeleton like an insect, it still has this ventral nerve cord. Now, what is ventral? Is it top or is it bottom? Okay, that's correct. It's bottom, it's belly. So its nerve cord is not dorsal like ours, which is on the back or the top. Now, here are some key parts that you're going to have to memorize. Okay, you have the mouth. Now, how do you know the difference between the mouth and the anus? The mouth is going to be closest to the clitellum. Okay, so the clitellum, which is that smooth little structure, okay, on an earthworm, that's closest to the mouth. The prostomium is a little mouthpiece structure that will move dirt and different particles into the mouth. It's like a little finger or nose that will move things into the mouth. And you can see the segments on this picture, as well as you can see the exaggerated setae. Now, I say exaggerated because the setae do not actually look like that. They don't look like actual feet, but they're more like bristles. They're making it look bigger so you can actually get an idea of what they are. And then you have the anus. So this is complete digestion. You have a mouth, food enters, and then you have an anus. Now something here at the very bottom, you can see the earthworm has a total of 5 hearts, and it has your blood vessels dorsal and ventral. But then if you look at in the very front where the brain is, the ganglia, the nerve cord drops down and is on the belly. It's ventral. So the nerve cord is ventral. Now something interesting about the earthworm, you have the mouth, you have the pharynx, which is like the throat area, and then you have the digestive tract. And we're going to jump to this picture. As you move down past the heart, you actually have the sperm duct, you actually have the seminal receptacles, the sperm duct, and the ovary. So the earthworm is a hermaphrodite. But the earthworm is not a hermaphrodite in the sense of the tapeworm, where the tapeworm can mate with itself. The earthworm does not do that. The earthworm will go up to another little earthworm, put its body against the other earthworm's body, and one earthworm will inject its sperm into the other, fertilizing that other. Now that other earthworm that was just fertilized can inject its sperm into the first earthworm's ovary, and then they both can leave pregnant. So that is technically sexual reproduction.
Okay, here we have a preserved earthworm. This is what you would be doing in class, and I'm going to identify some parts to it. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to first identify the clitellum. The clitellum is this smooth, light-colored structure right here. And because this is the clitellum, the mouth is going to be closest to the clitellum. You can see the distance. This is a lot closer. The furthest away would be the anus. So the anus is here. It's very flat on the end here. So right here we have the mouth, clitellum, then further away we have the anus. So this shows that we have complete digestion. We have a mouth, opening and an anal opening for waste. As we look at the earthworm, we can see the segments, the grooves, okay, the external separation. As I run my finger down the earthworm, I start to feel towards the end, especially right here, I feel a lot of setae, these little bristles. They feel like little whiskers. Okay, I feel a lot of setae right here, these little tiny bristles. Now you can't see them, but you can definitely feel them. If you look at it under the microscope, you would be able to feel the little setae. So let's take a look at the mouth and the anus. On my right is the mouth. You can see the little lip pushing food in. And right here is the anus. You can see they are very different in structure. This is the anus. This is the mouth, the head, the cephalized or cephalic region. And here's the clitellum, closest to the head. So since you guys are here, we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of an autopsy on our worm. So since you guys are here, we'll do a little autopsy on our worm. There we go. A lot of dirt, blood in here, dried blood. All these organs in here. Okay, right up in this area, you're going to have the hearts, the seminal vesicles. So yummy, yummy. And then basically follow the intestines down, all the way down to the anus.